Hello, and welcome to the Come to Your Senses podcast. I'm your host, embodiment-based coach, Mary Lofgren. Here, we explore how to live bravely and beautifully through a lifestyle of embodiment. You'll hear gems to empower you around mindset, mindfulness, somatic psychology, and neuroscience, as well as beauty, food, style, and the art of slow living to meet your soul through the senses. I am so happy that you're here. Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here because you may have seen the title of this podcast and seen a word that makes you shiver in your wellies. Which is the C word, commitment. So commitment, today's episode is called The Secret Pleasures of Committing to a Goal. And in this episode, I want to share with you some of the ways that I have reimagined my own relationship to commitment, and also what pleasures await you when, once again, you reimagine and redefine what commitment means to you. For a lot of people, particularly those who feel traumatized and, frankly, violated by patriarchal norms, especially when it comes to the creation of a goal, the word commitment can imply that you're just not working hard enough or you're not giving it your all. And I would imagine that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably work your ass off towards your goals and towards all of the things that you're accountable to and for throughout an average day. But when you are stalled on a commitment, what's happening is that the speed of the direction that you are expecting of yourself is not matched by the depth of meaning that you have grounded into your body. And I'm going to explain this in much more detail in just a few moments, but all of that is to say that a reimagined, pleasurable relationship to commitment, in my experience, and this is really at the heart of what we focus on in embodied intelligence coaching, is utilizing your masculine and feminine gifts in an integrated, dovetailed kind of way. Anything in excess produces that thing's shadow side. So when the traditional approach to commitment of a goal is based on a shame cycle and the expectation that if you don't have it, you just haven't worked hard enough, just really crunches the nervous system, and is kind of unsustainable because it takes a tremendous amount of energy to maintain. And so that would be more of kind of the shadow side of the superpowers that every human possesses that may fall under the name that we call masculine. So this ability to analyze, refine, direct, produce. And then there's a whole other set of superpowers, which is the superpowers of imagination, formlessness, empathy, feeling. These traits that we tend to associate with the feminine. And when these are experienced in excess, it can lead to lethargy and directionlessness and feeling like you are stuck in a cycle of, quote, self-care, when actually it can be a way of hiding from being accountable to what it is that you want to create. And so when we take these two superpowers of production, the ability to produce something, and imagination, the ability to dream something that has not yet been created, and unify them together, is when we tap into your full creative capacity. The energy of creation is very different than the energy of production. The energy of creation is when you match what Buddhists might call right effort or wise effort, putting your effort towards those things which you can control and create, And in doing so, allow what is asking to be created work through you. And today's episode is just a taste of actually a free workshop that I'm going to be teaching on Wednesday, January 19th, which is called The Secret Pleasures of Committing to a Goal. And the title of this workshop, or the tagline of this workshop, is How to Get What You Want Without Giving Yourself Away. There is tremendous joy and pleasure and satisfaction in setting goals and meeting them when what is driving you matters to you. And the more traditional method of goal setting relies on a shame cycle. And we'll talk more about that in the class, but essentially loathing yourself into action. And so if you have found that that method is not working for you, if you find that you want to feel more drawn by love and meaning than driven by fear and scarcity in the creation of your goals, and if you feel too crunched in by the excess of masculine energy, but too foggy and directionless in an excess of feminine energy, and you want to bring these superpowers together, come to The Secret Pleasures of Goal Setting, Wednesday, January 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern. It will be recorded, and you can head to schoolofsensualliving.com/free, FREE. And, one of the things we'll talk about in the workshop is the quality of our goals, and not just the things that we want to achieve, but who we want to become in the creation of these goals. And in the past, it's January, we've just begun a new year. And in the past, I would get so stressed out about, setting goals and basically all the hype that surrounds that type of thing at the end of the year. And so I would either set these massive goals that I had no idea how I was going to create and then disappoint myself, or I would avoid the whole thing altogether and just barrel on. And this year, for the last couple of years, the last 2 weeks of December are just the most sacred time because of how I feel I have been blessed to rewrite this story in my own life, and how excited I feel about my goals this year, and how through the practice of a more pleasure-driven method of setting and committing to my goals, it's like it doesn't add any stress to my life. It only adds more fun. And I'm going to be sharing all about this technology with you. So schoolofsensualliving.com/free. Head over there to RSVP your invitation, and I will save you a plush velvet seat. And so typically, whenever we want to make a change, it's driven by some sort of desire to shift a behavior that's causing suffering. And in a culture that is really shaped by negativity bias and kind of preys on our instinctual drive for things like love and safety and belonging, the mode of motivation is amplifying that fear and pain and shame. I remember when I was a teenager in the buddings of my eating disorder, positioning myself in front of a mirror in the most unflattering positions that I could possibly imagine, really trying to strengthen my self-loathing to the point where I would actually make a change. And you see this all the time in diet culture, where there are these before and after photos and this real binary of good and bad bodies. And that's a whole other episode that we could talk about. But, that's one example of the reliance on shame and pain to move towards what we want. And don't get me wrong, pain and shame can be great motivators. I mean, when I took the journey of sobriety, it wasn't because I wanted a healthier lifestyle. It was because I was in a lot of pain by how my coping mechanisms that helped me to survive at one point were now killing me. So pain and shame can be great motivators and provide a really lovely adrenaline cortisol cocktail that will spur you into focused action. But those chemicals in your bloodstream will only get you so far, after which point, when they run out, which they inevitably will, there is a crash. And often there is a return to the old maladaptive coping mechanism or behavior, that very thing that you were seeking to change in the first place. And so the cycle repeats itself. And so with the pleasures of committing to a goal that I'm going to share with you today, what's important is that, these pleasures are really just kind of the leaves on the tree. What's important is that we start by nurturing the roots of that tree with a deep awareness of the meaning behind what it is that you want. So when I think about what drove me to get sober, and alcohol is just one of the things that I practice sobriety around in my life. I practice sobriety around money, around love and dating, around codependency, around a number of different areas of my life. And sobriety, this is not a sobriety podcast, but I always find it helpful to know that the original meaning of the word sobriety is clarity of mind. So in other words, when we're in an addictive pattern around a substance or around a behavior or a process, the mind has been seized by this urge to stay in a state of numbness in order to avoid pain. And so one loses the ability to think clearly. I mean, I still have some addictive behaviors around sugar, and I'm always amazed at how my body has this habitual response. I mean, sugar was kind of my first love. It was my first coping mechanism. Juicy juice and Hawaiian punch, everybody. I used to have a permanent juice mustache because I would drink like a whole jar of that stuff a day because it gave me such a feeling of comfort and sweetness. And when I'm around sugar, particularly in unlimited amounts, I still find myself maladaptively using it. In other words, using it for something other than the purpose that's intended, in this case, pleasure and enjoyment, and falling into an old behavior where I lose the ability to allow the prefrontal cortex part of my brain to execute the functions of my life. And that's because when we're in an addictive cycle, it's the activation of the limbic system, that more primal, instinctual survival system, which when that system is activated, the prefrontal cortex, the more front part of the brain that governs executive functioning and our ability to perceive reality, starts to shut down. And so clarity of mind, aka sobriety, is the way that I practice it, is a lifestyle of staying awake and continually turning towards my motives and my urges and my behaviors as an external expression of what's going on inside of me and inside that survival system. I kind of forget why I started talking about this. Oh yes, shame cycle and creation of a goal. So in the beginning of my sobriety journey, in recovery communities, there's this thing called the pink cloud, which is when you're in your first couple weeks, couple months, and you feel so freaking good because you don't have the claws of addiction in your back. And you are finding a way of living that doesn't require you to abuse yourself from the inside out. And so you feel this immense flood of happiness and relief. And from a kind of neurobiological standpoint, this is like the pain has gotten so bad that any relief of the pressure of the pain feels like ecstasy. And then life returns, our vision returns from that pink haze to normal, and we realize I now have to find a way to cope with life as it always has been without numbing myself. And this is where the deeper work comes in, where we're not just relying on the absence of pain as a goal, but we are looking towards the creation of a more meaningful future. I was recently working out with my trainer, and he was telling me about how he sees this cycle happening with people at the gym who come in super strong and motivated in January. And I mean, this is just the way the diet and fitness industry works, to be honest. But come in super motivated in January, and there's this huge surge of adrenaline motivating them about their goal. But if they haven't landed that deeper, more embodied, more feeling state resonance with the creation of that goal, once the adrenaline runs out, the motivation runs out. And so the first step, 17 minutes in, the first step is not just what do you want to create, but why do you want to create it? What is the feeling state that you imagine the creation of this will bring to you? And then what is the deeper meaning and the brighter future that you imagine if you were to live in the resonance of that feeling state? And so we're going to go a lot deeper into that in the Secret Pleasures of Committing to a Goal class. I wanted to give you just kind of a little taster because I find it's impossible to experience these pleasures that I'm about to articulate without first having that grounded root in the earth of this meaningful, beautiful goal that you want to create. And so if we imagine that deeply meaningful, deeply embodied feeling state and resonance as kind of north on the compass, our action steps and our efforts become like adjusting the sails on the ship. And when you get the hang of it, when you get the hang of unifying these two aspects of forward motion on the seas of your life, there are some really deep pleasures that await you. And so the first pleasure is the pleasure of extra time that comes when you make a commitment. So there is a book called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. How the culture of abundance robs us of satisfaction. And a friend explained this to me once in terms of chocolate. So let's say someone places 3 different chocolates in front of you and asks you to pick your favorite. If you taste all 3, you will most likely be able to decisively and articulately express which one of these is your favorite and feel really confident about your decision. If you put the same person in front of 20 pieces of chocolate and ask them to choose their favorite, it is incredibly overwhelming. And you can, I imagine, maybe relate to this, especially if you are my age or older. I remember when I was in my 20s and 30s, we would, on weekends, snuggle in with pizza or bagels and whatever the hell was on TNT or TBS, which were 2 cable networks, which would show movies on the weekends. And maybe it was The Secret of My Success with Michael J. Fox. Maybe it was Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or whatever it was. Whatever was on the TV, we were generally psyched about. Now, if we compare that to today, I mean, I don't know about you, but I can spend a good 45 minutes just scrolling through Netflix and Amazon trying to decide on what I want to watch. And all of that is time and energy. Every decision you make takes time and takes mental energy. And so when you make a commitment to something, the container of that commitment frees up all of the time and energy that you may have spent on making the decision. So this is one of the reasons that I work out with a personal trainer as often as I can, because left to my own devices, there will always be things that present themselves as more important to the wandering nerve of my attention, depending on the day. But when I have an appointment and when there is an investment involved and when someone is expecting me and is tracking my progress on my fitness goals, I'm going to show up. And so that container is set, and all of that energy, mental and physical, that I might spend wavering on that commitment is able to be diverted to more meaningful things. So that is the first pleasure of commitment. The second is the pleasure of self-trust and self-reliance. And so with my clients, whenever we talk about committing to their goal, there's this wobbly, kind of fearful look that takes over their eyes, because for a lot of the people who come to coaching, there's a relationship to commitment that is based in a feeling of disappointment and frustration. And that makes a lot of sense when up until this moment, your relationship to commitment has resulted in inconsistency. And so your brain is going to look at that and just tell you, well, this is how you've done it every other time, so clearly you're going to do it like this for as long as you live for the rest of your life. Let's just keep it simple. Let's keep the story we have, because the brain likes to keep it simple in that way. And when you commit to a goal and you make the decision that when you meet the edge of your comfort zone, you are going to turn towards rather than away from that sacred, depth-fueled commitment, there is a deepening of self-trust. And what's required to get there is not just a change in behavior, because behavior is just a reflection of our thoughts, beliefs, conditionings, and emotions. It is a change of the internal landscape to influence the outer landscape. And so something I'd like to offer you is, if you hear yourself circulating thoughts about your relationship to commitment, or how you can't trust yourself, or how you can't rely on yourself, is to think about a way to rewrite that story. A way in which you are not shaming yourself for your previous experiences to commitment. And perhaps that story is very simply, no, I wasn't able to commit to this goal until now because I haven't found something that works for me yet. But today is a new day, and I only have to take things one action at a time. And this is what I'm going to do now. And look, oh my gosh, I just did it. I just committed to myself. Holy smokes, I can trust myself. I can rely on myself. It only takes one thought at a time to completely realign these neural pathways from, again, pain and shame being that driving motive, to self-love, self-reliance, and self-trust. And there is so much pleasure in knowing that you can trust yourself. And the third and final secret pleasure is drawing in your team as you create your goal. So I shared before that when we pursue our goals from a place where the depth of the reach of our effort is matched by the depth of our magnetism, the creation of the goal is really just the icing on the cake of the real process of the secret pleasure of committing to a goal, which is who you are becoming as you create. And whenever I set my sights, like this year, I have a big, beautiful goal. It's a savings goal. And I know that I cannot do big goals by myself, and that is a really good thing. I was listening to a Tara Brach podcast last night, and she was talking about how it's not survival of the fittest, but it is survival of the nurtured. In other words, those who excel, those who experience this soulful, sustainable, kind of success with their goals, when I look at people on that trajectory, I see green leaves and I see deep roots. And those roots are tended and nurtured not just by themselves and their own behaviors, but by their community and their relationships. And so I know that in order to create this savings goal this year, there is no way I can create that in a vacuum, nor do I want to. When we look at the art of creation, we have the flower and the bee. We have the sperm and the egg. We have the earth and the sky. There are these dominant energies that go into the synthesis of creation. And then there is an entire ecosystem that nurtures that creation into being. Think about the story of, a tree and how you look at a tree and it looks like it needs its roots attached to the earth and it needs the sun, but actually it needs the squirrels that nest in it and the insects that munch on it and the humans that breathe around it in order for it to flourish. And so it is the same with your goals. And in the past, when I have committed to creating a goal, the most rewarding aspects of that commitment, let's be honest, is the result. I mean, I am so grateful and so happy and so proud of the things that I have created in my life. What I am even more satisfied by is the relationships that I have drawn in and the partnerships that I have enjoyed in the creation of those things. I remember when I had a little private send-off party for Kitty Cavalier, which was the former name of my business and the burlesque persona that I operated under for a long time, before shedding that persona to expand the reach and diversity of the work that I can offer, and saying to my friends, it was 3 or 4 friends who had been assistants on retreats and had read my blogs and had listened to my ideas. Kitty Cavalier was never about me, and it was never even about this persona that I inhabited. It was about us. It was about holding space for the sacredness of sensuality and the intersection between feminine pleasure and power, and the experience of seduction, not as a tool of manipulation or cheap power, but as attraction through authenticity and a dance of desire between you and the divine. And every single client who walked through the doors of my business, who followed me on social media, was part of that creation. So I share this with you because I want you to know that if you have a big, beautiful goal that is whispering from behind your ear, or perhaps sitting on your chest like a St. Bernard, calling you, urging you, nudging you, it is not just about you. It is about something that is asking to be created through you, that you are the steward of, and that there will be companions and compatriots and consorts who appear on your path. And so, my loves, on that fiery note, I am so glad to share these secret pleasures with you. We've already been together for 30 minutes and we've just scratched the surface on these secret pleasures. So if you want the full meal, not just the aperitif, come to the secret pleasures of committing to a goal, happening on Wednesday, January 19th, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Mountain, 12 p.m. Pacific. I don't have the time for GMT, but I have faith in all of my friends across the pond that you can figure it out, and you can sign up at schoolofsensualliving.com/free. Thank you so much for listening. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review, and by us I mean me, on iTunes, and I will see you in the next episode. To hear more podcast episodes and learn more about embodied intelligence coaching, head to schoolofsensualliving.com. There you'll find the full library of lessons offered here on the podcast, as well as a free video series on how to use your body language to create more natural confidence and less anxiety and stress. Head to schoolofsensualliving.com today.